Hello and welcome to another edition of Storytelling on Orchard Street. I'm your host, Pete Salamita. We're in the broadcast studios, or the podcast studios, of P&T Knitwear Bookstore, 180 Orchard Street on the Lower East Side. It's a great bookstore. You should come peruse the aisles, maybe buy a book, go to the cafe, get yourself a drink. My guest today is Jose Irizarry. This is in his words. It's going to sound like I'm talking about myself. My name is Jose Irizarry. You can call me Joe. I was born into a blue-collar family and grew up in Park Slope, Brooklyn in the 1980s. I began writing poetry after a moment of reflection during George Floyd's protests. This man's death has hashed up many of the inequalities that I saw growing up in Brooklyn. It opened up the anger and the pain that I saw and that I also felt. I guess I felt a sense of responsibility to my people. I'm just telling their stories and mine. I'm 54 years old now and I write about 2 hours a day. The art of poetry has been uplifting and has given me a new perspective on my life. Welcome to the studio, Joe.
Thank you, sir.
Or Jose. Which one do you prefer?
Joe's fine. Joe's easy. Everybody calls me Joe, so I'm good with that.
Okay. So usually, my guests are promoting a book or something, and in this case, you're hoping to put a book out next year or soon.
Yeah, I mean,
you're working on.
Yeah.
But I saw you a couple times at the Neil Offerman. Oberman?
I'm not even sure. Yeah.
This is terrible.
I think it's Ken.
Ken. No, Neil. Oh my goodness. We're gonna have to cut this part out.
It's all good. It's all good.
Drawing a blank. No, I think it's Neil, but I forgot his last name. It's a long-standing poetry reading in Brooklyn. It's been housed in a lot of different places. It's currently run by Evelyn Katz and Anthony Vigoletto. And we both, I've gone a couple of times. I met you there. It's at the 6th Avenue Library on 6th and 9th Street in Park Slope. So it's good for me because I live in Park Slope. This says you grew up in Park Slope. Do you still live in Park Slope?
So my mother still lives on 15th Street. And I
15th
live
and what?
Between 8 in the Circle.
Okay.
And I live on Sealy. Between Sealy and Vanderbilt on Prospect Park Southwest.
Okay.
So we're not too far.
Yeah. Anyway, the reason why I wanted to have you on the show was because I felt like your poetry had a different viewpoint and perspective than other poets I've had on the show, and I feel like it's important to have different expressions and different different people come from different backgrounds and having different things to say, and you do that through your poetry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, So since I've been writing, I've been reading because I have to basically sort out how poetry moves, and also I have something to say, but words are they have to move freely, and so for me it's like I'm just trying to get a message out there. Try to keep it as plain and simple.
Right.
But
But you also want your message to sound poetic.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And I think I credit my mother. I've listened to a gazillion records as a child, and I think that's where I think the skill set comes from.
Okay.
And because I just listen to so much music, and that's when I read my poetry, I almost feel it jingle, like almost like a song, like a melody,
right.
And that's how I'm able to move it.
Right. Yeah,
if that makes sense.
It does. I noticed that. So you tackle a lot of subjects, and I imagine that I imagine most, if not all of them, are things you saw growing up.
Yeah.
I think Brooklyn was a very different place. I moved into Brooklyn in 1979.
Yeah.
And it's kind of became it's nicer in some ways, but it also became unaffordable for a lot of people. A lot of people moved out of the neighborhood. I think when I first moved into South Slope, there were way more Puerto Ricans.
Yes, I agree with that. Right. I mean, and for me, my poetry is about the inequalities, and how even with poverty and struggle, I always saw the humanity in these folks.
Right.
And I mean, I talk about drug addiction and all these other topics, but I was able to see.
Were they personal or was it just what you saw around you?
No, it was personal.
Okay.
It was personal. Yeah. A lot of family members were on drugs at the time, and I was a kid,
right.
So I was able to look. I say I'm like looking from the outside in,
right?
And then also I was kind of also pulled into it as I turned into an adult and a teenager.
So both of your parents are Puerto Rican?
That's correct.
Are they first generation here?
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
Do you know what their reason for moving here?
Yeah, they lived on a mountain in Puerto Rico, and there was no running water. There was we actually went to one of the houses, that they lived, and it was on stilts.
Wow.
And they had an outhouse, and at this time they had like a small like a little spout of that you could use outside basically to brush your teeth and what have you.
Holy cow! Yeah. So we're talking about poverty.
Yeah.
And how young were they when they moved? Were they married when they moved here?
No. My mother was 11 and my father was, I think, 16.
Okay.
And they both came from basically the same part of the island.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah, they came from a place called Ajuntas.
Uh-huh.
And and so that was that situation, and they met. And
how did they meet?
So it's a funny story, and it sounds crazy, but my mother and father are first cousins, but they didn't know each other because my mother left, and that side of the family didn't really speak to our side. But then when they got to Brooklyn, they reacquainted themselves because they're family.
Right.
And they liked each other, and that's what she wrote.
Okay. And what did they do?
So my dad was a college student. He graduated with an associate's in business management, and my mother was a dental assistant.
Wow. Okay. They had good jobs.
Yeah. So they had decent jobs. I was actually one of the only family members that had a car in the neighborhood. So I kind of was and I was the only child.
Right.
So it really benefited me.
Right.
And I was able to get a lot of dedicated family time with both of them. It was good.
You said your mother lives on 15th Street. Does she still? I mean, is that where you grew up in that house or?
Yeah. So we lived on 22nd and 5th for about 9 years, and then we for the rest of my time I lived on 15th Street, 423 15th Street, Brooklyn, New York.
So you've been in that neighborhood. It's really kind of South Slope, really.
Yeah.
That was yeah.
So. And then that's home, and we've been there ever since.
You mentioned your mother living there. Is your father no longer with us, or are they?
Yeah, he's passed on.
Okay,
that's correct.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, and so that's what it was. My dad was also an artist.
Okay,
he did a lot of art. He was a mathematician from the stories I hear, and he was a decent guy, you know, and So
so was that an influence on you?
It definitely was. So because if you read my comments, you see there's a lot of negativity in a lot of the stuff that I write about. But I had like a solid 6 years of like just really good stuff. Like the family was tight, and then my dad got sick. He got schizophrenia.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and it was a rough time. So,
was he hospitalized for it?
So he was not. He was medicated, but the deal was that he was hostile. He was violent.
Oh, so because of the schizophrenia.
Yeah. So we had to basically, it basically changed our world. We were from a family that was so tightly knit, and then we ran into this drama.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And it's weird. I don't know that much about that. why do you think it manifested itself at the time, or had he had little problems along his life and then it just blew up, or just curious?
So it feels like it seems it's genetics.
Yeah.
His father was schizophrenic,
Oh,
and so I think it manifested in him.
right.
He was good till like he maybe in his 20s, and then he, for lack of a better word, went off the deep end.
Right.
It was interesting. The interesting thing is that even as a sick individual, he would pick me up every week, and he would do father things.
Right.
And it was interesting because it was a different type of what's the word, relationship.
Right.
He couldn't communicate, but he knew that he had affection for this kid,
Wow.
and so I
So
found
how old are you at this point?
that was about 9.
Ah, it's a tough age for that.
9 or 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the thing about it was that it was so you could forgive a person like that because
You can't help it.
because he can't help it, and
Right.
then it was so there was no bitterness. Although I told my mother, even as a kid, I said you got to leave this guy.
But there's no bitterness, but it doesn't make it any less difficult.
No, it was listen
And difficult for your mother too.
Yeah, she felt that she wanted me to have a dad, and but it was a dangerous situation.
Did they stay together the whole time, or did they eventually she give up?
She broke up with him.
Okay.
Yeah, she broke up with him, and it was
And then you went.
and yes, and then I would go visitations. I had once a week.
So she made the motion to split up.
Correct.
And you went with her somewhere else.
We stood in the apartment,
I
and
see.
he moved in with his mother.
Oh, okay.
For a little bit, yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, it was quite it was quite traumatic.
It has to be. At 9 years old.
Yeah. And so that's going on, and then like I said, there was drug addiction and all this other stuff happening around,
Like with friends
family
or
members.
all the family
Oh,
members.
a lot of my family members were going to jail. So it was an intense time. But again, I had a solid foundation with my mom's. Even though we were going through that, it felt like it was me and her against the world.
Right. So you had a good relationship with your mother.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and you still do?
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's a genuine good person, and
Sounds like she saved your life.
Yeah. Well, she did, and whatchamacallit, but I had other folks
Okay.
that also helped. So it was a community.
Right.
And even though, like I said, my family members were basically falling off, as they would say. They were going to jail, they were dying, many of my uncles did really heavy numbers of incarcerated time.
Right.
But I was there when they would call from jail and collect calls to my mother. And,
did you ever go visit family members in prison?
I went to Rikers Island with my mom to see my uncle.
Right.
It was intense.
Right.
To say the
Sounds
least. I'm a small child.
It's a tough way to grow up.
Yeah. It's a tough thing to see.
Right.
So you just because you're not engaged in the process of all this abuse, this drug addiction, the whole gambit of it.
Right.
You're still watching it. So, you could it has an effect on you.
So we're pretty far into the show already.
Sure.
You want to read a poem that reflects some of this? Or?
Sure. I got one actually.
Yeah.
The Brooklyn blocks reeked of poverty, but the play of children spilled out onto the street like shards of glass that gleamed over our Brooklyn blocks, a portrait of the forgotten. No Picasso lived on our streets, but the pain and suffering and social unrest were being painted by the bloodstained hands of a mother holding her son, another body bag filled with no answers. The needles that filled the empty spaces where my people went to play. The anticipation to burn a glass pipe that's filled with rocks, trying to heal the pain that cannot be seen. The drugs ate away at my people and took their bodies as payment. It was the selling of our dignity. It was the selling of our children. It was a wonderland of broken dreams where the body bags were being packed tight and moved in the night, like the hustlers who were selling their bundles stamped with the names of our children. We played under the heavy weight of the machine, waiting for our numbers to be called. The resilience of children were in battle for the soul of my people as they grew like flowers of hope out of the cracks of the sidewalk. Many of my kin would not make the promised land, even as they walk on the roads. I am the byproduct of this trauma, but was witness to those who sat in the trenches with me, and bloody as we were at times, I felt a belonging as we all carried the same sickness. The losses were significant, but my memories carry me. I speak for them because they could not speak for themselves. I hope I can do them justice.
See, man, that's powerful because it's real. I mean, I feel the realness, but it's also eloquently said. Really.
Thank you.
This is why I wanted to have you on, because you're talking about like real life struggles.
Yeah.
And you could tell it means a lot to you. You're not just making it up. So this is 80s and crack epidemic.
Exactly. That's what it's called.
And, so from the time that your father first had his problems, and you're 9 until the time like you finished high school. Did you go to college?
I got a GED.
Okay, GED. So what was your life like? Because this is all going on around you. You have strife in your family, with your father and your mother, and probably having to work extra hard.
Yeah.
So what were you like? What was Joe like? How did Joe get here? Because you seem to be a very well adjusted human being.
Working on it constantly. It's a work in progress. But yeah. Joe was actually arrested 3 times.
Okay.
The last time was for attempted murder.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so actually, the next poem I will recite is about being incarcerated.
Okay.
And so I would like to just give you...
I want to know how we got from 9-year-old Joe to the Joe that got
So
how old were you then?
So the first time I got arrested, I was 16 years old.
Okay, and what for?
For fights. So for fighting. So I cut somebody.
Okay.
And then
it was over what? You remember?
over stupidity, man.
Okay, stupidity.
I had to. It's just as easy as that. There's no.
Yeah, but that age, that happens.
It happens.
Yeah, especially on the streets.
It was.
Did you hang out a lot on the streets?
Oh yeah, I was on the streets all the time.
All right.
Yeah.
Where? I'm just curious,
that was on 6th Avenue, behind the 88th, MS 88, the Annex.
Oh.
That was called the Annex at the time.
Right.
It was 6th Avenue between, I think, 18th Street and 19th Street. If I'm not mistaken.
You're talking about my neighborhood. It's,
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So this is all going on when I was in college at the time.
In that park.
Right.
In that park.
Right.
Yeah. So we had a tussle, and then it got ugly. Right. And so I cut some guy.
Okay.
And that was it. It was I cut him and I got arrested.
Right. And what was that like for you? What ran through your mind? Like
it was what's the word?
It was just. I mean, I'm assuming he made it.
Yeah, it was just part of. It felt like part of everyday living for me.
Right.
It wasn't like
it wasn't unusual.
I was faced, but I was like, you know what? I belong here, so to speak. Right. I felt like that.
Right.
So yeah.
So did you do jail time for that?
I never did jail time.
Oh, you never did.
I never did jail time. I did this. I went through the system.
Okay.
3 times.
Right.
And
not even for the attempted murder.
And this is why I was willing to interview, because I just so had a lot of breaks.
Right.
And that was one of them.
Right.
I took 5 years probation.
Right.
And even within that 5 years probation, I got into fights. If they would have caught me, it would have been over for me. I would have went up.
Right.
But it was just that was in the ethos of my world.
Okay, so go to the poem that you wanted to read about that, and then we'll talk more about maybe what happens later or in your life. Or
yeah. So this is
So you're bringing up all this, like you never wrote any of this down. You didn't write when you were a kid. You didn't.
No.
So you wind up in your 50s. What leads you to start writing about these things, not about life now? Like what? Because was this just like was this churning in your head all these years, or?
It probably was.
Yeah.
Like I told you, I said to myself, it's like PTSD. It sits with you. It never goes away.
Right.
And so this is it.
Right.
I'm putting it on paper.
Okay.
So this one, I just want to say one thing. When I was here in prison, going through the system, they put me in a cell with a black kid. I'm a teenager now. He's a teenage kid. And when I saw him, I was going to be sharing a bunk with this guy. And
but this is waiting for the trial?
Waiting to go through the system before you see the judge.
Okay, right.
And I thought this guy we were gonna have some problems, because when you go in, you're thinking everybody is everybody is ready to prey on you, or you're gonna prey on them.
Right.
And so this is this poem.
Right.
The smells of bleach and urine permeate my senses, still surround the prison cells of my mind. A claustrophobic battle eat away at the soul. I now yearn for my yesterdays with notes of understanding, those who breathed love into the heart and filled it with kindness. I hid these glimmers of light deep into the pockets of stories that have yet to be written. I now front a face of steel, my laceless sneakers flap in the wind as I walk in the shadows of my sins. My existence now belongs to a system of hypocrisy as the poor and unwary live out fantasies of criminality. As heroes are made of stripes and metal, as every arrest feeds the bravado that strokes the ego, they live in yesterday's stories. As newspapers write about these feel-good moments, it cuts to the bone as I sit here with my cellie, a boy who smells of 1,000 deaths. The black boy cries tears of regret. I hear the humanity bleeding from his chest. I put my hand to his pain to try to understand, but I could only hear his testimonial tears calling for redemption, calling for the chains of poverty to be lifted and the tiredness of the addiction be treated as a symptom. As poverty is the purveyor of a scorched life and pointed fingers feed to the paranoia of hood life, as blacks and Hispanics are dredged up like polluted soil and carried away like a commodity, or war rages in the mind of the impoverished, as hunger is fed to the wheels of justice and shame is the byproduct of its pain. As criminalized souls now walk with the ledger, punishment lands twice for the letters in my name continue to keep me out of this game. I've swallowed the pill of justice. I've served my time. My wings are free. My song is heard for the first time. But hunger still fills the bowels of my life as this rap sheet has my feet wrapped in legislative shackles. I now understand why sometimes men have desperate hands, for hunger waits for no man. So I put it to paper to try to understand and started making this noise to make sure that you hear me as a full-throated man. And even with this ledger holding my name to this ball and chain, I still rise. And as I shine, I will continue to carry a conscious eye. My words will continue to reflect those who were left behind, those who are left to the dustbin of time. I understand their tears because they are also mine.
Yeah. Oof.
I feel like crying.
Yeah, I bet, man. So, so now, did you get into drugs?
So, not really, but you know, I got high.
Right, but I mean, I'm serious. Yeah.
No, because I was into. I like I said, I had a lot of positive influences.
Right.
On top of dealing with this, I had people who were pulling me away.
Right.
Helping me.
Right.
Getting me work. So I had a lot.
Right.
Going on.
And you said you got your GED. Then what?
So I got my GED, and from there, I tried to go to school.
Right.
I tried to go to school, but I think I might be dyslexic. Mm-hmm. And so that might be something that also, but you know, the educational system wasn't there for me.
Right.
You know, I was in dropout prevention programs, and they tried. And I got to tell you that those corners of help helped me see something else. Even though I was dabbling in the ugly, I saw the possibilities. Right. People came, you know, I had counselors, I had people saying, hey, you know, you don't need to be that.
Right.
And I was like, you know, basically.
So maybe at the time it didn't feel like it was helping, but in some ways it did.
It did. Right. Yeah. I was just like, you know, I would listen to them, and basically when I walked off, I was like, yeah, fuck you. You know what I mean? And then, you know, then we just. You know, we did street. We were in the streets. You know what I mean?
What was your mother doing, or what was her reaction to all this?
So the problem with my mother, and I love her to death, but then she started dating a man who also was on drugs.
Oh man!
And so he came into the picture, and he was just another wrench
Right.
in my problematic situation. You
Right.
know, many of these things probably
Instead of having help from another adult, it made it worse.
Many of these things probably might have not happened if he would not moved into the picture. He
Right.
came in at like 12, so instead of him being a blessing,
Right.
he was problematic.
And he was there throughout all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that is where that's how that was the gambit that I was running into.
Right.
It was like a brick wall.
Right.
So yeah.
So what? So again, I don't know unless you fill me in on it. I don't know the rest of your life, but I see you now. What do you do again? I think.
So I'm a superintendent of 3 buildings on Vanderbilt and Sealy. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in charge of 3 buildings.
Have you done that for a long time, or?
So I've never done it before this time, but I've been here now 14 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And we lived in Connecticut. We moved back to Brooklyn.
Right. So with all that going on, how do you feel like you straightened yourself out to the point where did you have other jobs before that, or it was just like you grabbed jobs here and there, or?
Yeah. So I really couldn't get work because I had a felony conviction.
Oh.
I had to take that felony conviction in order to not go to jail.
Oh, that's bad.
So I had to take that bullet. So everywhere I went to get work, it was like, I really couldn't push through. That's one of the things that if I ever do something, that's where I would focus. Try to get those folks who, not some of them, I hate to say it, they can't pull themselves out of it.
Right.
But
there are some that can.
But there's a lot of them that can. They just need that extra push. They need guidance.
Right. And if there's no help, then how does it happen?
That's right.
Right.
And I had the help.
Right.
And that's why that's why I'm here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this before a couple days ago. I don't know why, but generally speaking, the prison system is just a form of punishment. Yeah, it's not really looking to help anybody change their life for the most part, right?
I could tell you that my uncles, they never came out the same.
Right.
They've been incarcerated, even free.
Right.
And that's because the lack of a better word for it, but that is their situation.
because of their standing, they can't do things that
they can't. They can't. I mean,
they don't have support. They don't
have support. They have to get on SSI. If you get on SSI, then it helps. But
right. It's somewhat of a. I can see what he's saying. It's somewhat of a prison.
It's a prison in itself, and even when you speak to them, I can't reach them. Right. I read this poetry to them, and they don't see it.
Right.
They don't see themselves in the poetry.
No.
It's interesting.
Right.
But nonetheless, I write for them.
It's funny that you said that because while you were reading that, I was imagining what if have you ever tried to help other people in the system by because you go to these poetry readings in Park Slope or wherever. It's not the world that you're talking about.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So I do read it. Anybody that I run into I run into the project sometimes, and I'll see if a group of dudes,
right,
and I'll tell yo, let me kick it to you,
right,
and they do, and sometimes they're like, yo, that shit is dope, that shit is fly,
right,
and and sometimes they're like, nah, nigga, get away, you know what I mean, and I got it is what it is, but at the end of the day, that is. But what
I meant in a more organized way.
No.
Yeah.
No, never.
Do you think about it?
I do think about it, but again, I'm. I also deal with a little bit of stage fright.
Sure.
So that is something that now I'm
well, it wouldn't be an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Right. But I do. I've done some poetry readings in Williamsburg, which was really cool, and it's something to consider. Right. For sure.
I could, in the 90s, I worked for Lifebeat, the music industry fights AIDS, and my job was. I talk about this, comes up on the shows. I don't want this too much be about me, but for the most part, we were bringing music to people with AIDS in hospitals and long-term care facilities. Sure. A lot of the people had criminal past.
Yeah, of course.
But then we also one day did a show in Rikers Island.
That's amazing.
And it was it was pretty something else, man.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that kind of stuff is kind of needed,
It is. It is. I agree. And you may propel me into something like that now that we talk about it.
I think the first step is to get this into a book form. That's your first step.
Yeah, thank you.
Because from what I've heard already so far, it's all powerful and it needs to be out there. And then once it's out there, maybe other things will come from it. Just like me, I put my book out. Not that many people read it, but still, it pushed me into a lot of things like this. You don't know what's going to happen once you do it.
This is why I'm here.
Right. Good.
This is why I'm here.
Good.
You know what I mean? So this is why I'm here. I know that. And that's why, my wife, God bless her soul, she's the one who found 9th Street. I said, I have poetry, and I said, I want to read it. It was my birthday. I said, I want to read it. She said, well, let me see who I can find. And we found 9th Street and 6th Avenue. And it was a sweet thing.
Here's a curious question. Like I said before, when I moved into the neighborhood that we're talking about, it was more mixed. I'm not going to lie. There was a lot of Hispanic people. There was some Polish people. There were some other things. But most of those people are gone. Where did they go?
It's a sad state of affairs, because I could tell you that even though what I'm telling you is the rough aspect of it, there was a beautiful culture there growing, and people were flourishing. I'm basically talking about a darker side of that, but many of the people that did make it, they've done well. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people that I grew up with, not so much.
Right.
But I know that there was many people that my wife, she came from my area.
Okay.
She came.
How'd you meet your wife?
We're from the same neighborhood. She's
right.
from 17th Street. I'm from 15th Street.
Okay.
It was that kind of
17th and what?
Between 8th and 9th.
Because when I first moved to Brooklyn, I was 17th between 4th and 5th.
That's rough.
Now I'm on 16th. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that area.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's a good area. I'm talking about 4th and 3rd, because I hung out between 4th and 3rd.
It's a little different. A few blocks made a big difference.
Made a big difference. Where my wife grew up with, that was basically a war zone.
My wife, when I met her, was living on 3rd Street between 4th and 5th. Do you remember that? There was the park across the street. Now it's a beautiful park, but it was a park that no one went into unless you wanted to buy drugs or something. And every other building was boarded up, was burned down. Yeah. She got robbed 3 times, probably from people on the block.
I bought a book of pictures from the 70s and 80s. When I go to, I'm gonna do this month's reading on 9th Street. I'll bring it, and I'll show you where I used to play. Yeah, it's something to see. I
just always wondered what happened to all. It's just like New York City. Everybody gets pushed away. Once a neighborhood looks like, that looks like a good neighborhood. People with more money move in, and where do the people that don't have money go?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you that many of the people that I know, they moved to Staten Island, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, and the rest went to. If they have money, they went to Florida.
Right. Okay.
So that's where they're at.
Right. Do you feel like you have a connection to Puerto Rico?
I do. My wife is very much connected, so I was able to go back with her. And she is much more. She's schooled. She schooled me in. She's from Ponce. I'm from Ajuntas. They're kind of close. Also, she had a house in Caguas, which is part of like a city, and those areas were good. We went there. She showed me, and I got an education.
Great.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Right, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How long have you been married?
We've been married. You put me on the spot. She's gonna make fun of me now. I think we're close to 30 years.
Good for you.
Yeah, thank you, man.
It's my wife and I's wedding anniversary today.
God bless.
Number 39.
Good for you, man. Good for you. That's awesome. Yeah, she's a great partner. I have no complaints. If anything, she should complain about me, but that's another story.
I kind of feel the same way. I think my wife helps me a lot more than I help her, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. No, she's a blessing.
Right.
So yeah.
So what else do you have you'd like to read?
So I got this one. I think you might have heard this one, but I like this one. This is one that so this is basically about me loving the hood.
Okay.
I am the radical whose twisted soul live among the wreckage of twisted steel and graffitied fields, where concrete structures house the flames of Taino hearts and asphalt streets are lined with bloodstained roses, where crying dandelions blow wishes in the wind and graffiti butterflies feed on sin, where bullets of pain bleed graffitied names written by the hand of God as Krylon moves with the majesty and fluidity of the seventh chapel. Rest in peace lives Rest in peace lives in the stories. Rest in peace lives in the stories of yesterday's glory as chains of gold line the walls of hip-hop halls as we pay homage to Sea Hood life on museum walls. No disrespect, but I want my eulogy painted on piss-stained walls where horseflies are dancing to the smells of poverty and the shine of broken glass. Tell us these streets are not paved in gold. Where Pacheco's dancing salsa just because she's feeling herself, and the smells of arroz con gandul and pernil fill the spirit of my people. Where the corners of the bodega are occupied by the hustle, I want to hear the sirens of police cars crying as my face is embalmed in between mortar and brick. Where emptied out blunts are left on paved streets of gold teeth, where thug life meet and blood spills across my graffitied mug. That is home. I want an artist like Quiñones to bless me with his artistic hands and spray that Rust-Oleum to create that Boricua flag as it is raised high with clouds of tears, as hands of gold hold a cross to my soul, as fat lace Adidas and folded arms flex the body into a jailhouse stance. I want all this taking place on a Brooklyn block where the spics are riding high as the Capicu flies and Latinos with chancletas come alive. With Heineken-encrusted breath, make sure you clip that Philly blood down my chest so I can get a hit. Where you pour for the dead, light me a candle of serenity. I'm already blessed, but I want to feel that hood love. Rest in peace, my niggas.
Wow. So tell me about the good memories from that period. Because you're talking a lot about, well, I guess that one's a little more about solidarity.
So for me, it was a wonderland in a sense that we played all summer.
Right.
We had Johnny Pump. Like I said, there was a lot of poverty. So I had the fortunes of not being poor, but still seeing the beauty of and the humanity of these people. I stood with my aunt all summer, and sometimes they didn't have a lot. But I was always treated equally. Right. If they only had a little bit of
you stayed with your aunt?
Yeah.
Where was that?
On 7th Avenue, 14th Street.
Why would you go there?
So my mother and father worked.
Right.
So she babysit for me because there was not like,
this was
before like camps or anything.
Right, sure,
that.
sure.
Yeah,
right,
so I just stood with my aunt.
This was when you were very young.
Yeah, I was like 8, 9, 10, 11.
Before all the problems started.
Exactly.
Right.
So we stood there and it was great. I have 5 cousins. They were awesome. Right. We ran around. We played. They played double dutch. We played stoop ball, tag ball. We played stick ball. We had a lot.
You could have had a whole different life if your father didn't wind up with schizophrenia.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Wow.
Yeah, we had our fist fights. Every Saturday morning after the kung fu flicks, we went out and we fought karate on the in the streets. Right. For a few hours until somebody came out crying, and then a parent will stop
it. You guys weren't playing around.
No, we beat each other till somebody bled. Right. You know what I mean?
Is this aunt or your cousins are they still in your life?
Oh yeah. My aunt is Titi Mary, and so she's awesome. She still lives in Park Slope. Okay. Yeah. She lives on 16th Street and 5th Avenue. So and my cousins still live in the neighborhood.
16th and 5th.
Yeah.
So then we're neighbors.
Yeah. She lives on that corner building on 16th, right across from the Black Horse, I think it's called. Yeah. It's like that building that houses elderly.
99-cent store.
No, it's
on the other side.
On the other side.
On 5th actually.
On 5th Avenue. On the corner of 5th. Right. Yeah.
All right.
And so
crazy. I probably have passed her in the neighborhood at some point.
Yeah. So
her health is good.
She's good.
And your mom's health?
Yeah, my family's they're sturdy.
Right. Okay.
And then the women in the family didn't do drugs, just the males. Right. They were busy raising children.
Right. Well, thank God for that. We were fortunate. There was somebody to keep it together.
Yeah, they held us down, the women in the family, so it was good.
So earlier you told me that you write 2 hours a day. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I just in the morning I have I start reading the news for about 20 minutes, right, and then the coffee's made, and then I start writing. Right. So it lasts sometimes.
So you get up early before you have to go to work.
Yeah, I get up sometimes at 4:00 in the morning.
Just to do that.
Just to write. Wow. Yeah, so I write maybe.
But that's probably a good time of the day to write because it's quiet.
Yeah.
You're the only one up, and I think your mind is different at that time of the day. You're not
Yeah.
bogged down with all the things you got to do, and
That's perfectly said. I got to tell you, because at first the writing was like an addiction. So I was writing it everywhere.
Right.
But now I'm more stable.
Right.
I know what I have pieces that I like.
Right.
So like I said, let's just say, for instance, I wrote about what's the welfare. I wrote about welfare.
Okay.
What is it called? Let me see. There's a specific letter to it. The EBT card.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I wrote that. That's a poem that's not finished, but I saw it. I wrote it, and it worked. I know welfare. I know it very intimately. So I was able to dig back on that.
So it's not ready for airtime.
I mean, I could read it, but you'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll kick it. My EBT card filled my alcoholic dreams, took me to Never Never Land where alcohol flowed and I was always on top and never low. The bodega man told me, "Papi, this is illegal." I told him, "Just charge me like it's a box of cereal, nigga. I'm trying to take these 40s and get so high that I see the moon waving at the sun and the darkness of my shadows are cast out by the sunrise. And then I'll awaken, a miserable shell of a man, to start it all over again with the sickness and rationalization that my children are gonna go hungry, where the humanity fights with the pain in my back and my perspiration smells of intoxication. God, you have forsaken me. I have to blame somebody for this abomination. I say fuck it as I take my EBT card and go buy a pack of smoke, steal a 5-spot for my wife and go buy a bottle of White Rose. I get straight with it, bags under my eyes and the stench of my breath curls the hairs in my nose. My skin is wet to the air as I take a puff of my smoke. I have a ton of lies hiding behind my eyes, waiting to be realized. I have awakened an inferno in the crying eyes of my baby mama's eyes, for the realization that those who pay the price are my seeds that are left to dry out in my alcoholic dreams. I have planted them and watched them wither in the wickedness of my sickness. Left them parched of love and sustenance, left them to the winds of my own making. I keep my lying eyes inside, for this quagmire I have created, have left all that I love hollowed and blue inside. So I keep my lying eyes inside. Tomorrow will be that day that I rectify a better day. But for now, I will try to get back on that cloud, that perfect picture story, where I'm in my glory, where alcohol flows and the sickness I carry makes me feel whole. I cannot shake the hubris of my mind. I am scraping nickels together that cut and leave me scabbed. I have turned myself into an abrasion. Unrecognizable creature. I would drink a bottle of piss if it had alcohol inside, as my family watches me through alcoholic eyes.
Wow.
That's not finished.
Right. Well, sounds pretty finished to me.
Yeah, but I
guess
had a lot to it that's
Right.
that's still not there. But yeah, that's something that just wrote that.
So, so far from what I'm gathering, everything you're writing, generally speaking, is from deep down place, and a real place in your life. You're not making up stories.
These are all real.
Right.
Even that story, that's my stepfather.
I see.
But he's not an alcoholic. He's a heroin addict.
Oh, okay.
So what I did was I changed it over.
Right.
I changed it over because it ran into it. So
Right.
I pick a topic and I write. I'm not thinking about what I'm writing about. I write and I say, you know what? And then as I write, it shows itself.
Right.
As I read, I said, oh, this is my fucking stepfather.
Right. I get it. Sometimes I don't know where I start writing. I don't know where it's going to go, and then I realize I'm going to bring it to a place that makes sense.
Exactly.
So I've had people tell me, why don't you write something? All your writing is kind of dark, or why don't you write something? For me, I didn't have the life you had, but I've had things that make it easier for me to make a story out of something dark.
Yeah.
Do you try to lighten up sometimes and write?
So I wrote a poem about my son.
Okay.
Yeah, his 30th birthday.
Right.
I mean it's beautiful.
Right.
And I would probably perform it one day because
Right.
it's good, you know. But you know, this is my dirt. This is how I basically, it's like it's like my opiate. This is why I thrive, you know?
So I'm not going to say other poets aren't writing from a real place, because you could write about anything. It could still be, because a lot of my stuff, I might write a poem and it could be about anything. I like to write about the frailty of humanity in different ways. And even if it's not me, sometimes I feel it deep down. And I don't know if this happens to you, but there's some of my poems. There's one about somebody that's homeless. There's one about when I used to go to Rivington House, the place where we did shows for people with AIDS. And I wrote about a particular person that lived in this long-term care facility. Sometimes when I read those like type of poems, even though they weren't my life, I feel like I get really emotional and drained after I read it. You're writing about stuff that were real about your life or about the people around you, and it seems like a very emotional topic. How do you feel when you finish reading or while you're reading it?
Yeah, I mean, you just saw me now. I read one and I got emotional.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, sometimes they hit me.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes they hit me. But, you know, for the most part, especially if I'm on stage, my deal is I have some stage fright. So if I could just do it, that's great news.
Right,
that's great news because I deal with some of it. So
I think you get locked into your reading, and I don't know if anybody would, because that's what you have to do is get locked into the reading
and that's
turn everything else out.
That's exactly what I've been doing.
You don't read like you talk. You read like in a different rhythm.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to I'm trying to follow what I'm trying to almost. To me, it's almost like a song.
Right.
So I look at it in that terminology.
Well, I think because I was a drummer for so many years, I do write in rhythm.
That's awesome.
Even without trying.
Right.
But you know, reading and writing are two different things, because I feel like when you read, it's a performance, even if it's not like, you know, it's not like you're juggling plates or something. It's a different type of performance, but you are there to take a story you wrote and make it become alive.
Yeah, and so I was dealing with so much stage fright at first.
But you've only been doing it a few years, right?
Yeah, well, I've been only reading for like 2 years.
Yeah, me too. It's funny. We started writing them in our 50s, and we started going out.
Exactly. Like 2 years. And at first, you know, I hit it, but then after I knew I went in and I was like, oh man, I'm not gonna be able to do this.
Oh,
and
really?
Then what I did, because I knew that I had to get this out, was that I started memorizing it.
Oh, that's good for you. I can't do that.
Yeah, so when I was able to memorize it, I was able to give it life.
Right.
And then it was actually even nicer, because then it's almost like a performance.
I've seen other people read without, do what you're saying, just memorize it and read it out without the paper or whatever. It's liberating, because then I have a lot of movement with my hands. Yeah, and also you can relate to the audience a little more because you're not looking down.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, I do a project with a guitarist friend of mine, and sometimes his nephew, where they put music to my poetry. And we now have 30 pieces with music. So we don't repeat them a lot, but I repeat them enough that by now I should be able to do without the paper. I'm actually just afraid I'm not going to get it right. I might even have it memorized and I don't know it.
It's nice. At the same time, when for me, you know, it's like even that last poem that I just read, I forgot half of it on stage one time.
Right.
And I was just like, I just left it.
Right.
And the beauty of it with the phone is that I said, you know what, if it doesn't work, I said, you know what, I'm gonna let it go, and I'm gonna do it on. I'm gonna just recite it instead of, you know, off the top of my dome.
Right.
And that's how I do it.
Okay, cool. So I usually read one of mine.
No, it's true.
So I'm gonna read this. I don't know if it makes sense with your poetry, but maybe it does. I don't know. It's called Battle to the Bitter End. I fight the monster with all my strength and might, but he overtakes me with a force so fierce it knocks me to the ground. I swing and kick with fury as the monster mockingly laughs at my flailing. I try to get up, but I'm so exhausted my knees buckle and I slump helplessly to the ground. I feel the monster's hot, musty breath on my neck as I struggle to once again rise to my feet. It's a futile attempt, though, and I can't muster enough energy, so I give up. I weakly look up and see the monster slowly walking away with large thunderous steps that shake the ground, and I pass out lying in a pool of my own sweat and seep restlessly on the cold, damp ground. The next day I awaken to the loud roar of the monster as he wildly swings his arm and he points to me as if to say the fight will never end because the monster is myself.
I like it.
Thanks.
I like it. It's funny because I had a situation where, I actually had a situation where a guy attacked me,
Really?
and I fell on the floor.
Wow.
And it was, he felt like he was a big dude. I looked up and I was like, wow. So
Right.
I can relate to it, you know. And at the same time, you're speaking of your own
demons.
Your own demons. I like that.
Yeah, and how. Yeah.
Yeah, it's deep. It's deep. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's why I appreciate poets. I mean, the day that I was presenting, I appreciate. There was not a lot of people there, but I appreciated the fact that there were poets there, and you acknowledged me.
Right.
Many of the poets after acknowledged me, and I was like, yeah.
Well, it actually was a half decent turnout. It was better than some of the.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, you never know what you're gonna get, and and sometimes it just feels good to be around other people doing the same thing, and if they appreciate you, it feels
Exactly.
even better. I feel like I got lucky because when I started, I met some people that really believed in me, even though I was new at it, and it gave me encouragement to keep going.
Well, that's why I'm here, because
right.
you saw something in me and you brought me here,
Right.
and I appreciate it, and I will continue going. I'll be there.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Yeah.
Well, it's great for me. I can walk there.
Yeah, I know.
Because a lot
exactly.
of the readings are in Manhattan, and sometimes you're tired, you worked all day, and it's like I feel like, oh man, I don't feel like going back outside, going on the train, traveling.
No, I know.
But this is just I
once.
could walk. I could eat a light meal, go walk there, and then walk home. It's pretty cool. So, what's new? What's next for you?
So I mean, I just writing. I have a few poems I'm writing about that one that I just read you, and like I said, I'm gonna see where I can take this. Right. Next year is probably gonna be, if I'm gonna try to get something established in terms of like a book or something, or even some of them getting published. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's a big thing for you. You should.
Yeah.
You probably have enough poems.
Yeah, I mean, I have actually a writer
Right.
who said, you need to get them out there.
Right.
It's real work.
It's worth the trouble. So you have one last one you want to read before we go?
Sure. Let's see what we got here. I always like this one. You've probably heard it. This is called The Hood I Love. I saw through young eyes as pigeons flew into Puerto Rican summer skies, beyond the lights into the darkness of tenement rooftops. The coops were set free and my dreams flew with 1,000 wings over the bodegas and the burnt out buildings. The hustlers and the street fighters, the pit bull riders, the fakers and the wannabe makers, they all pour their love out onto the street with the sickness of a fighting addict, beating back the morning sweats, that aching back that calls you and gives you no respect, that painful beauty that feeds the vein, that sickness that loves you and gives you pain. That was what fed the wings of my inspiration as I flew through the hood's intoxication. The love I received was my emancipation as my wings took me to a land of pure elation. Gangbangers kicked off a full-throated harmonization as the Congo beats lifted us off the ground, as Latinos of all stripes sang the version of Eddie Palmera's Puerto Rico. I opened my wings to the sounds of this Latin king as my feathered wings took me higher to the humble streets where I saw the fire in the eyes of those who could not fly. They brushed me off and looked at me cynical. I wanted to stay and play in the haze, but when I looked up, I saw dirty needles walking upright in a parade as they were dancing into the skins of my people. Trumpets rang loudly as if God was coming down to stop this abomination, but it was just a salsero who was rocking a falsetto as trumpets finished with thunderous claps. The salsero finished up his act, walked back to the block, copped the 10-piece at the cuchi frito, called the kid with the wings and saved them half. They had a laugh. they smoked a little grass and waved the Puerto Rican flag.
All right. I love it, man. Cucho Fritos, there was a place forever right down on the corner from where I live. Fourth Avenue and 16th Street.
I remember it.
Yeah.
I remember it.
Do you remember, did you ever, there was a sports bar called 205th? Do you remember that place?
250s on, between
205th between 9th and 10th?
9th and 10th.
It was a sports bar, but on Friday nights they had salsa. And I saw Potato and Chuco Valdez,
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Right in my neighborhood, in
awesome.
a sports bar, it was really weird. And Potato is a legend, congas,
Yeah.
And he's a real small guy. He actually danced on the congas.
I
never seen anything like it.
That's cool.
Yeah. Hey man, it's been great.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate your time.
We're kind of at the end of the ropes here. You've been listening to Storytelling on Orchard Street. My name is Pete Salamita. I'm the host, and with me has been Joe Irizarry, sharing his heartfelt and deep poetry about growing up in a poor neighborhood surrounded by drugs and gangs and everything. It's real old-time Brooklyn. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And keep up your good work, man.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Good night, folks.